this girl right here, she's lost. She's hurting, she's dark, she's in so much pain. But the beautiful thing is that she's dead. She's buried, and I don't visit her grave.
I've had my friend killed in front of me and shot at. I've been taken at gunpoint and humiliated by rival gang members. I've had over 29 staples placed on my head.
I don't even know who she is. I don't even look like her anymore. This is what redemption looks like.
I want justice. But more than that, I don't want anyone else to have to go through this.
I know how the judicial system needs to change because I've been impacted by it.
This false dichotomy, you have to either be tough on crime or soft on crime.
He's tough on crime.
I think the real measure on crime is, are you being smart on crime or dumb on crime?
The state of Florida tends to get looked at as a sort of political petri dish. National news outlets swoop in every election cycle to see how the state will vote. But if you go beyond the local polling lines and into the homes and workplaces of some Floridians, you'll find that quite a few of them can't vote even if they wanted to. That's because if you're convicted of a felony in the state of Florida, you lose your voting rights for life. And that affects nearly 1 in 10 Floridians. This year, there's an amendment on the Florida midterm ballot that could change that. Amendment 4 would automatically restore the voting rights for Floridians with convicted felonies, except for murder or sex crimes, after they completed their sentences. A massive voting rights restoration like that could have a big impact on elections. 4 of the last 5 presidential elections have been decided by less than 300,000 votes in Florida.
NBC News is now taking Florida out of Vice President Gore's column and putting it back in the too close to call.
Amendment 4's passage would restore voting rights for an estimated 1.5 million Floridians. And in an increasingly polarized country and state, the effort has a pretty strong backing across the political spectrum.
I lost my voting eligibilities for life before I ever had the opportunity to even exercise my voting eligibility. Not mature enough to vote, but mature enough to lose it for life.
One of the people working to restore these voting rights, including his own, is Angel Sanchez, a former gang member from Miami who did 12 years in Florida State Prison for attempted murders and robberies. Now, he's living just down the street from the very wall he hid behind to avoid shootouts as a teen. Only this time, he's living a much different life.
Once I got to prison, my case drew me to the law library, and it is sitting in the law library that I discovered a passion for the law. I would get old introduction to business books, and sitting there in prison looking through these books, I would see pictures of kids my age sitting on the grass with their book bags, and I envisioned myself being one of those kids. It was almost like seeing a parallel world of what I could be and what I really was. I went from a defendant in that courtroom to a judicial intern in that courtroom. I got to walk in with the judge when they would say, "All rise," her in her robe, me in my suit, in the same courtroom where I used to once walk in a inmate jumpsuit and in handcuffs and shackles.
As the law stands now, Angel won't be able to take the Florida bar exam to actually become a lawyer after law school unless his civil rights are restored.
I started law school optimistic, knowing that despite the reality, something and someone will see the work that I'm doing and say, "I'm gonna help." And that's something that someone has been Amendment 4.
If you don't face your fear, it's going to stop you for the rest of your life. I am Coral Nichols, and I am the co-founder and vice president of Empowered to Change Incorporated. Empowered to Change is a nonprofit organization that is a diversion program that works with the judicial system, homelessness, human trafficking victims, re-entry from prison to help reduce the cycle of recidivism. I'm gonna walk your little self into court, and I'm gonna unsuccessfully discharge you for lying to me and for lying to this office whom all we wanted to do is
I'm not lying, Ms. Coral.
All right.
Before Coral was running a nonprofit, she spent 5 years in Florida State Prison for grand theft and fraud. And before that, she voted in every presidential election she was able to. Now, because she lives in Florida, she's not allowed to vote.
We are all born with a need to belong. That's why you have a lot of young kids who go into gangs. Voting gives voice to people. You belong to society. You belong to culture. So when my voice matters, then I have a buy-in in the community.
Floridians for a Sensible Voting Rights Policy is a nonprofit advocating against Amendment 4. Executive Director Richard Harrison said there are certainly inspirational stories about people who have turned their lives around, and whom most would probably agree may be entitled to clemency and restoration of voting rights. But that decision should be made on an individualized case-by-case basis. Voting restrictions for people with felony convictions aren't as strict in the rest of the country. There's no standard set of laws, so states are left to come up with their own processes. Maine and Vermont let people vote even if they're in prison, while Iowa and Kentucky restrict everyone with a felony conviction. The only way for someone to get their civil rights restored in those states is to plead your case to the governor. In Florida, this process can take up to 7 years to even apply, and your chances of being approved depend on who the governor is at the time.
Okay, I deny full pardon.
Under former Governor Charlie Crist, more than 155,000 offenders in Florida had their rights restored. But under current Governor Rick Scott, that number was just over 3,000 between 2011 and 2017. Governor Rick Scott's office did not respond to CNBC's request for comment. Harrison also said there are fair criticisms of the current clemency process, but throwing out the system in favor of an automatic, blanket, no questions asked restoration of voting rights is bad policy and the wrong approach. While Angel and Coral are focused on the big picture, fighting to restore millions of people's right to vote, some of the people they're fighting for are still just taking it day by day. One man just got out of jail and started his first day at ETC. Meanwhile, Leela was about 30 days into the program when we met her, and she's working on securing a steady job.
So when you're talking to somebody and they say, well, I'm going to run a background check, then you say, okay, well, I want you to know that yes, I've made some poor choices. Don't say you made mistakes, because they weren't mistakes. They were poor choices, okay? Because there's a level of ownership that you have to take. You did that. But what I'm doing right now is I'm working a program. I'm actively involved in changing my life. So you want me on your team because I have purpose, and I'm working really hard to change my life, and I would be an asset for you.
Yes, my name is Leela Tice. Okay. L-E-I. Yes.
Girl, this is Alex.
Hey, how you doing? I know that was kind of funny. We're actually friends in jail, and she had a way bigger charge than me, but that's kind of, encouraging too, because now I know that if she had a job there, then I know I can get a job there.
Landing an interview may seem like a small feat to some, but Leela's job search is part of a larger argument for voting rights restoration. According to the Washington Economics Group, passing Amendment 4 would be more than just a restoration of civil rights. It could give the state of Florida a $365 million boost to its economy. The study looked at two major factors: recidivism, which is when someone returns to prison, and household income in Florida. It points to data showing the recidivism rate for those who are granted their rights back is lower than the overall population of released inmates. Of course, in Florida's system, whether under Crist or Scott, those granted clemency are part of a much more selective group compared to everyone with felony convictions. But if people are less likely to go back to prison after their rights are restored, they'll be saving taxpayers the $20,000 a year it costs to incarcerate someone in Florida. Plus, they'll be out participating in the economy.
I was surprised by the change because I thought it was strong. And then we went back and did more research and look at see nationwide what has happened. And the numbers are there. No question that it's positive.
I wouldn't say that this is the silver bullet that would change everything, but it is certainly a low-hanging fruit.
If Amendment 4 passes, they'll have the potential to change policies that make it harder for former felons to get hired.
We could do things like ban the box, which would simply mean that I get to get in front of an employer and show them who Coral Nichols is instead of a box on an application that says I'm a convicted felon.
One example of one of these possible positive outcomes is Matt Farina. He went through the Empowered to Change program, and now he's a manager at a local burger joint.
I've been in the court system since I was 17 years old. There's not too many people that have more felonies than I've had and made more mistakes than I've had. They'll tell you, if he can do it, there's definitely hope for a lot of people. Now, I'm making enough money to support my family and actually in a position where I can, hire people that started out like myself, which is a pretty big deal for me. Getting my rights restored, as far as voting and stuff like that, it's a big deal. I like to have a say in what's going on. I have kids in this world too.
Navigating the world of employment with a felony conviction is complicated.
I used to be afraid that speaking that I was a convicted felon and the words "empowered to change" would be shame, and that I would harm it, and all of the good that it means.
I was crying myself to sleep on a top bunk in a homeless shelter saying this wasn't the plan. I couldn't get a job. No one would hire me. But I kept trying. The only thing to show in my resume was my prison jobs.
I'm not a fluke of society. I am not some special case that did it that other people can't either. I know lots of people who've changed that have decided to be a part of the solution instead of the problem.
I'm exceptional because people have made exceptions for me. And I think if we have a system that doesn't depend on exceptions, but rather making exceptional stories the norm, we'll have more stories like mine.